everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Coincidence, a remarkable concurrence of events or circumstances without apparent causal connection. It's always amazed me that one can believe in something like coincidence, but aren't open to the idea that things may very well be connected. Tonight's stories involve cases where it's possible that some happenings were that of chance, that the events were random. But then there's that chance, naturally, that they weren't random at all. I guess that's for you to decide. So, let's get started, shall we? Everything I'm about to describe took place from June 2019 through June 2020. I was 19 years old when it all started. I'd been dating my now ex-boyfriend for nearly 5 years at the time. Naturally, we felt that it was finally time to leave the comfort of our parents' homes and move out on our own together. We decided on a studio apartment in the historic district of our hometown. It was the cheapest that we could find, and somehow we got approved despite the fact that we made well below the required wage for this place. It was incredibly small, only around 500 square feet. We weren't in an apartment complex, but on the back end of a very large house that was converted into a duplex. The house itself was built sometime in the 1930s, historic district, and was rather shitty. Our front door opened up into a tiny sunroom that sat between our even tinier kitchen and our living room/bedroom. The doorways between each room didn't have actual doors attached, so we hung curtains in the doorways to separate them. We had no central air, no oven, and the floors were uneven. But it was home. Honestly, the location was why I fell in love with it. We were a 5-minute walk from all of our mom and pop shops, farmer's market, ice skating rink, in the cutest little town you've ever seen. Best of all, it was ours. Things started to get weird the very first week that we moved in. We had an upstairs neighbor in the duplex whom we'll call Kay. She was super friendly, and we made introductions right away. The first time we spoke, she immediately informed me that our house was haunted. Me being me, I was intrigued and a bit excited. I'm going to have to give you all a breakdown of everything she told me that day, because it's relevant to nearly everything I experienced while living there. She began by telling me that our section of the house in particular was the source of the paranormal activity. She had been living in this house for 3+ years before my boyfriend and I moved in, and a few months before we showed up, our section of the house had been newly renovated for the first time. We all know how that usually goes. The sunroom, as I knew it, had nice wood floors, but previously they were concrete. There was a hatch that opened up into a dirt floor crawl space underneath the house, with a staircase that was broken halfway down and didn't reach the bottom. Due to the broken staircase, anybody who decided to venture down would need to bring a ladder, otherwise they wouldn't be able to get back up. This is where it starts to get creepy. On one of the walls down there, painted in a red substance, were the words, "Good girl," and a few red handprints to match. Kay actually showed me a photo of this to back up the authenticity of what she was telling me. This immediately gave me a very uncomfortable kidnap and torture vibe. Who knows what somebody could have been up to down there, back in the early 1900s. I am solidly convinced that something horrible happened down there, and that's the origin of whatever presence occupies that house. During the renovation, the hatch was completely sealed off and covered by the new flooring. This is when, according to Kay, shit started to get weird. She started noticing cabinets in her kitchen opening and closing on their own, mysterious footsteps, seeing things moving across her room at the corner of her eye. just big nopes all around. I quickly stopped being excited and instead became a little nervous. This was my new home after all. Things started happening almost immediately and grew worse over time. My boyfriend was a skeptic and did not take anything seriously, but I certainly did. Almost every night, between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., I would hear light knocking on our front door in the sunroom. One knock at a time, very slow. It would continue until somebody got up to check the door. And the moment I would walk through the doorway into the sunroom, it would abruptly stop. Our trash can was also in the sunroom. Periodically throughout each day and night, I would hear the unmistakable sound of the lid opening and the trash being rustled as if something were being thrown away. Often, when I was in the kitchen, I would see movement in the sunroom from my peripheral vision. I swear, it looked like a person standing in front of the trash can. Nothing was ever there when I turned to fully look. I always felt like I was being watched. Always. 5 months into our lease, I ended things with my boyfriend. I can't explain it, but being there changed me. I began acting differently, feeling differently, thinking differently. We decided it would be best for him to move back with his parents and for me to remain in the apartment by myself. And that's when things started to get worse. Shortly after the breakup, I grew afraid of sleeping alone. Whenever possible, I would have friends stay the night with me for the benefit of some company. I would never tell my friends about what I was experiencing or why I wanted them to stay. One particular weekend, an old friend of mine from out of state that had just reconnected with me was visiting the city. I suggested that he stay with me rather than pay for a hotel room while he was in town. We go way back and weren't opposed to sharing a bed, so he quickly accepted my offer. The first night he spent in my apartment, my now boyfriend, let's call him T, who was only a friend at the time, came over as well, and the three of us stayed up, getting drunk, playing cards, and chatting. While we were having a good time in the living room, we all suddenly heard something get thrown into the trash can. I was used to hearing this every day, but now 2 of my friends had heard it as well. That was a first. We all paused for a moment, exchanged the obligatory, "Did you guys hear that?" and continued our game of cards. We all ended up passing out drunk and experienced nothing else that night. The second day, I went to work and B left to spend some time with other friends until I got home. We met back at my apartment around 7 p.m., where we spent the rest of the night playing video games and smoking weed. Everything was going smoothly until around 1 a.m. We both were laying in my bed reminiscing on old times for a while when I noticed the time. I decided to warn him about the knocking that would most likely ensue in the near future. He didn't take me very seriously, and I soon turned off the light as we were ready to sleep. Around 15 minutes later, we both jumped when we heard it. Knock, knock, knock. B let out a very loud, "Oh, fuck no." I thought his reaction was hilarious, so I decided to mess with him. I told him that according to a rumor, if a spirit knocks on your door, you should never open it. If you do, you'll let it in and it will stay with you forever. I proceeded to leap out of bed, walk to the front door, and turn the knob. He followed me to the door and was frantically begging me not to open it. I laughed and sarcastically replied, "Of course I'm not going to actually open it. That's some white people shit." We both had a good laugh, but I could tell that he was a bit freaked out. The next morning, he told me something that sent chills down my spine. A few weeks before B came to visit, I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time in my life. I fell asleep on my couch and woke up, unable to move. I saw a black shadow fly out of my closet and hover over the top of me. and it felt as if it was holding me down, attacking me. Typical sleep paralysis shit. It scared me so badly that I left my apartment, and I didn't return until the next day. B experienced the exact same thing that second night, even down to the black shadow emerging from the very same closet. I was uneasy when he told me because I'd never told him about my experience weeks prior. And it was his first sleep paralysis episode as well. I'm not claiming that either of our episodes were paranormal in nature. It was most likely an unsettling coincidence. It is relevant, though, because it scared the fuck out of me. I started genuinely attempting to get rid of the ghost or whatever it was, because my fear had reached a new level. Kay gifted me with some sage after a conversation about it, and I would burn it every day in an attempt to cleanse my home. I would often smoke weed and, as dorky as it sounds, try to make friends with the spirits in my apartment. It became somewhat of a ritual for me. Get high, walk around my place with sage, speak out loud and say things such as, "Okay, spirit, ghost, whatever you are, could you maybe just leave me alone? Or coexist without the spooky shit? Can we just be chill, please? I'm just a 20-year-old girl. My name is Jay. I'm by myself, and you really freak me out. It isn't cool. Let's just be cool. We're cucumbers, bro. I swear, I will leave as soon as my lease is up, but I'm stuck here. I'm sorry that I'm in your space. Please stop scaring me. Thanks, bud." Of course, to nobody's surprise, my goofy and informal pleas for a truce with the spirit got me nowhere. In fact, things just seemed to escalate from there. I was terrified. I literally tried to tune out all of the freaky shit by overloading my senses 24/7. Blasting my television, wearing headphones, staring at my phone, playing video games, getting stoned out of my mind. Nothing worked. I would always notice the paranormal activity no matter how hard I tried to tune it out. It was too much. One night, things took a turn. It may not sound significantly terrifying, but it is the creepiest thing that has happened to me in my life so far. T and I had just made the switch from friends to partners, and COVID-19 had just made its appearance, so we decided to quarantine together. He moved in with me and I was ecstatic. I finally would never have to sleep alone again. I could finally sleep in peace. Or so I thought. We were in bed early that night, fast asleep by 10 p.m. A few hours had passed and I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of movement. I noticed that my blanket was being slowly pulled off my body. At first, I assumed it was T stealing the covers or shifting in a way that was causing the blankets to move, until I glanced over at him and saw that he was dead asleep and unmoving. On top of that, I realized the blanket was being pulled from the opposite side of me from where he was laying. Cue instant panic. I immediately grabbed the blanket and made a desperate attempt to yank it back, but was met by resistance from the other end. It was as if somebody was firmly holding it and fighting my attempts to pull it back up and over my body. At this point, I screamed and practically jumped on top of T. He woke up, still half asleep, and asked me what was wrong. I didn't want to scare him, so I told him it was nothing. He rolled over to go back to sleep, and I laid there, utterly frozen with fear, for nearly an hour before I was able to drift back to sleep somehow. I stopped trying to rid myself of the spirit, and I never experienced anything like that again. The next few months were entirely occupied by the standard, more mundane happenings. The knocking, trash can, feeling of being watched, seeing things, etc. I became accustomed to it all, and I have to admit, I was sad to leave when my lease expired. I know that there are many people out there who have seen things that would put my story to shame. Full apparitions, hearing voices, etc. All in all, the haunting that took place in my apartment could have been much worse. I look back now at my time I spent there, and I miss it. It was very much an adventure. My life changed, and I changed as a person, more during my year in that apartment than at any other point in my life. Perhaps whatever was with me in that place helped facilitate those changes. I sometimes wonder why I did certain things that I did while living under that roof, things that I never would have done in the past, things that were entirely out of character for me. I've heard that hauntings can make people act differently. In the end, I'll never know. All I know for sure is that I'll never forget that place. This definitely isn't the freakiest thing that's happened to me, but I've been thinking about it ever since. About 2 weeks ago, I went for a normal run on the trails that I've been going to for a few years. The whole area is pretty wooded, but you can definitely see through the woods. The trees are thin and the grass isn't too tall. I decided to take a path I normally don't go, but I have been down a few times. I was heading down the path and I started to smell dead animal. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it was, but it wasn't pleasant. I then see a disheveled-looking woman kind of stagger out of the woods, carrying a bag. I don't think much of it, considering we have a pretty big homeless population, and I thought maybe she was squatting in the area or something. I started to get closer to her, and when I got next to her, I waved and smiled. And holy shit, her eyes were white. No pupils. Almost had a blue tint, like frosted. She looked ancient and had on red face paint, think Viking face paint, and very short white hair, almost a buzz cut. She pointed at me and said something. I couldn't hear her though, as I had my headphones on. Her body language was almost approving, like when someone tells you, "Hey, good job." She kind of nodded and threw her head back and smiled. While I was next to her, I realized the smell was coming from her bag. It took me a second to process what I saw, and when I turned around to look, of course, she was just gone. Like I said, the area is pretty wooded and very open. If she had took off running or something, I should have seen her in a split second, even if she sprinted. Not even a minute later, my ex texted me, saying that he was thinking about me and asked if I was okay. It could have very well been a coincidence, but the timing of it weirded me out. I didn't really get a bad feeling from it, but who knows? I just keep telling myself maybe it was just a crazy lady. This happened when I was about 5 years old, and my half-sister would have been around 2. Our family was temporarily staying at her grandparents' place in Melbourne, Australia. My bed and my sister's bed were set up on opposite corners of the lounge room. They were against the curtains, which covered windows that went from the ceiling to the floor. I also remember tall bookshelves creating shadows that loomed over me at night. They always freaked me out for some reason. I woke up one night and I saw my mom watching over my sister, with her back to me. Instantly feeling jealous, I called out to her. No response. I called out again and still no response. I shouted out the next time and she slowly turned around. I regretted calling out to her at all in that moment. She silently drifted towards me, almost as if it were in slow motion. Her face was completely expressionless and staring right through me. Nothing about her appearance made me think that it wasn't my mom, but I had an awful feeling. I hid under the covers and cried myself to sleep. I remember the suffocating feeling of breathing in hot air, which makes me think it wasn't a dream. I didn't hear anything other than my own breathing, no footsteps away or anything. I didn't experience anything else weird at that house, but I've always remembered that one night. I'm 25 now and have encountered strange coincidences over the years, but nothing this frightening. It seems pretty boring now that I've written it out, but I was terrified at the time. So this was a 4-day stay in a cabin in the woods in Wisconsin, on blue-green property. I cannot for the life of me remember the exact cabin, but I think it was 413. No promises. Right away, when I was alone, this was a trip with my mother, it felt like I wasn't on my own. I'm normally pretty hard to shake, but I couldn't bear being alone, as I felt like I was being watched by something. Both my mother and I checked the cabin thoroughly, but we never found anything. The first night, I heard what sounded like footsteps on what would be the room above me. But the cabin only had one floor, with a slanted roof. So it doesn't make sense to have been someone. It sounded like a small child running across the length of the slanted roof, and both me and my mother heard it. For our peace of mind, we went to the neighboring cabin. The cabins were divided into 2 suites, one on the right and one on the left, but we quickly discovered it was vacant, so we went back to our own. The next morning, I awoke to find my clothes, including the ones I fell asleep in. I get cold really easily, so I tend to have pajamas on and a hoodie on as well. I had on pajama pants that were much bigger than me. They were hand-me-downs and tied really well around with the string. So I find it a bit hard to believe that I would have untied them while I was asleep. But all the clothes were thrown about the room, and it took me a solid 5 minutes to find the shirt that I had on, which was tangled up in the sheets. Maybe I just got hot and took it off while I was half asleep. But I'm from a fairly warm place, and never have I done that before. So part of me doubts that I took off my own clothes. Even if I did, it wouldn't have explained how the clothes that were in my suitcase in the far corner of the room were scattered about. I'm typically a bit of a neat freak, and never would I have been able to sleep if I knew my clothes were thrown everywhere. Later that day, I was alone once more, as my mother had run out to get some food from a nearby restaurant. I heard breathing from the next room over, which would have been my mother's bathroom. I brushed it off as nothing, but then remembered that I was alone in the cabin. So I called my mom and I told her to get back here quickly, and then I listened. It sounded far too rhythmic to have been the air conditioner, and I could have sworn I could hear a clear exhale and inhale. The cabin layout was simple-ish, so I'll try to describe it to the best of my ability. There was a living room when you first walk in, and a closet with a washer and a dryer that we never used, and a kitchen. Then down the hall, perpendicular to the kitchen, was the bedrooms and bathrooms. One was outside of the respective bedroom and larger than the other bathroom, and the bedroom at the end of the small hall had a bathroom hanging off of it. Go back to the living room. There's also a balcony, which was protected from the wind by the other suite, which was vacant, and our own suite. And there was a bathroom through a thick wall from the balcony. Hopefully that made sense. It'll be important later. Once my mom was back, I remember getting up from the table in the living room and heading to my bathroom. But I swore I saw something in my bedroom, so I backed up and checked. Nothing was there. I thought I saw a lady dressed in all white, Cliché, I know, and had vanished. So I decided that I was just going batshit and went to the bathroom. Nothing happened to me the rest of the day, so I'll skip to the third day. This was the day the running on the roof got extremely prominent, as though a child was running back and forth. Once again, that would have made no sense, as the suite next to ours was vacant. At some point, we'd even called the front desk, asking them to call the suite next to ours and ask them to quiet down some, and they themselves said, "There's nobody in that cabin." At around 2 p.m., I looked up from my laptop. I was sitting in the corner like the child I am as opposed to the couch, and I swore I saw a woman who didn't fit my mother's body type staring at me through the window's reflection. As in, she was inside the cabin, watching me using the reflection. And I even got a picture of it, and I'll eventually post that. For reference, my mother is rather large. The woman I saw was clear, not the outline of the curtain, and she was thinner, still overweight but not by much. And she was in the long white gown of who I thought I saw in my room. They looked to have a romantic tuck and a messed up face, and they were much taller than me. For reference, I am 4'10", am a guy, and didn't even have a dress packed. Neither did my mother. Plus, I was sitting down and out of the reflection, so I knew it couldn't have been me. And the dress went out some. The curtains didn't. So I don't know what could have caused that reflection. Half of why I'm here. I want to know a decent answer for the woman in the reflection, as it didn't look entirely like a woman or human, for that matter. It seemed more humanoid and in a dress than a woman in a dress. Final night there, I was exhausted, as I didn't really sleep well the night prior, and I went to bed at about 8:30, but I got up before I ever fell asleep and went to the living room, as I felt something hit my foot. It felt long and hard, almost like a round pole. I told my mother this, and she told me that the first night, she felt like something tried to push the top of her head down and out of the bed. We talked about it for a while, and eventually, I laid back down, and nothing happened the rest of the trip. So, to recap, running across the roof on nights 1 through 3, night 1, my mom apparently felt something try to push her out of bed. Day 2, I woke up to find every article of clothing, including what I'd had on, was thrown about the room. More roof running, seeing something in my bedroom, and weird breathing from an empty room, and loud breathing. I heard it through a wall. Day 3, weird reflection of a woman that looked like her face was damaged in the window. Night 4, felt like my foot was hit by a pole. I also want to include that nothing in the cabin felt evil per se, more mischievous and almost felt motherly at times. Granted, misguided, but I am pagan, so maybe my mind is a bit off on detecting this. And according to my mother, nothing felt evil, just off and ultimately creepy. The trip, again, was only me and my mother. I really need your all's opinion on this. I believe in some occult things, but cannot provide a solid yes or no as to if I believe in ghosts. I'm looking for any answer, be it paranormal or not. This happened to me originally when I was in the 3rd grade, back in 1999. I'd been playing in my backyard when a neighbor asked me if I could come to the park to play Foursquare with some other kids. My dad was right there in the backyard with me, and he gave me the okay. So I ran inside to head out the front door. I was so excited and such a third grader that it took me a minute to realize I didn't have any shoes on. Since part of the walk was through gravel, painful gravel, I decided to run back and grab them. I turned back, and once I got to the front door, I realized it was locked. I could hear the lawnmower going in the back, but I was too short to open the side fence to the back. So instead, I started to hit the doorbell and knock slightly obnoxiously, knowing that there were other people home. After a couple of rings and knocks, I turned around to see how far my friends had gotten, but was immediately distracted by someone that looked out of place. Directly across the street, someone in a long gray coat, black pants, and white shoes. Their face wasn't entirely visible due to them having a hood on, and they had their head tilted down a bit. For a moment, I thought, maybe that's my dad. Same height, maybe he even had a coat like that. Something seemed so familiar about this person, but it couldn't be my dad. I'd just seen him. And besides, he was mowing the lawn. I raised my arm to wave at the person, even though I had a feeling they wouldn't respond. And they didn't. They just stood there, looking down but forward, and most of their face still obscured by the shadow of their hood. Then, for another one of those split seconds, I thought I might walk over to this person, talk to them. Only just as quickly I realized or felt that that was off limits somehow. Suddenly I heard my front door open. It sort of snapped me out of the daze, and I turned around real fast. "Did you forget something?" my mom asked. There again, I needed a moment. Then I quickly turned back around to point out the man to my mom. I'm asking who he is, only to realize that he's not standing there anymore. My mom asks me what I've said, but I don't repeat it. I just walk inside and grab my shoes. I went to play Foursquare, and I told my friends about the strange man, and that was it. Until about 10 years later. Christmas at my parents' house. Time to open presents. I received the staple items, socks, underwear, shaving stuff. And my bigger gift is this very nice gray pea coat. Super warm. Exactly what I was looking for since I now lived in Seattle, a much colder place than California. Eventually, my cousins say that we need to go outside and take our annual family photo in front of the tree in my parents' front yard. It's a giant evergreen, and they decorate it every Christmas. I take this opportunity to head out early and smoke a quick cig, grabbing my coat and putting it on the way out. I shuffle across the street, and before I start smoking, I grab my phone to see if my girlfriend called me back. She hadn't, but I started getting lost on my phone for a minute. Then I had the craziest sense of deja vu. And then I see a flash. I look up, and it's my cousin, taking a picture of me from across the street, telling me to put out the cancer stick and get ready for the picture. I toss the smoke and shuffle back over to my parents' side of the road. As I'm approaching, my cousin asks if I can help set up the tripod. I agree, and then she says, "Oh yeah, try not to look like a creeper in this one, okay?" Then she sort of laughs and waits for me to react. The same time, she's showing me a picture that she just took of me. Instantly, I was transported back to 1999, at least in my mind. I have no explanation for what I saw. I just know what I saw. The picture was me, but it was also the man that I'd seen across the street over 10 years ago. It was someone in a long gray coat, black pants, and white shoes, their face slightly obscured by their hood, facing forward and looking down. Still gives me chills. I can't figure out if it's a form of time travel, glitch in the Matrix, or truly the most insane coincidence of all time. Well, everyone, that's all the stories we have for tonight. But be sure to join me every Friday night for a new episode of The Darkest Hour. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com. And remember, if you love The Darkest Hour and you never want it to end, be sure to hit that subscribe button and tell all your friends. And don't forget to check out our subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.